this was actually brought up to us from Taylor from Vigilant Liberty Radio, iDesert Blog on Twitter. He brought this to our attention from Matt K. Lewis over at his website. He has a podcast which was really interesting to talk about this with a former Bush White House guy, and they had this long discussion about what was valued in the conservative movement, and is it really as anti-intellectual as the left has said? It was a really interesting discussion. Fishy, you listened to this. I did as well. What are some thoughts that you had from it?
The anti-elitist strain are the people who look at what, say, Harvard professors have wrought and decided that it wasn't as good as they thought it was. They've seen the chaos that so much of this academia, the intellectualist, the institutional left has done with their planning, and they're hoping to control everything and plan your life for you and order people where they should go, what they should do, what they should eat, how they should work, how many hours, all this sort of thing. That the elitists have got it wrong, and that there's a proper strain in the conservative movement against that. And then they contrasted that with this anti-intellectual strain, they called it. And this was, I guess, captured the most by figures such as Sarah Palin. They used her as an example. Someone who seemed to be very proudly anti-intellectual in their estimation. Well, I didn't know that I necessarily agreed with that. That Sarah Palin might use phrases in a simple manner of delivery that can oversimplify some concepts. I don't think that she's an anti-intellectual as much as an anti-elitist, but they were going with that theme of there being an anti-intellectual strain. And I think it was evidenced in part, they thought, by some of the people in the Tea Party. Now, that's not to say that the Tea Party hasn't been thoughtless on occasion with how they do their messaging and how they might approach an issue, or how there might have been arguments over tactics and strategy to get to the goals that everyone shares on the right, or everyone, we think, pretty much shares. But that there is that charge that they leveled. I don't know if I necessarily agree that there's a whole lot of anti-intellectualism, but I do know that there's a need for us to message in a way that asks people to think through an issue. And when I was looking into that, it reminded me of something that Thomas Sowell had said, and I think this fits very well with things that we talk about on this program. I just wanted to breeze through it really quickly. I'm going to put the link in the chat. But he talks about being an undergrad at Harvard, and he's putting forth a theory on how something would work economically. And his professor asked, and then what will happen? And so Sowell went back and thought about the problem a little bit more, and he came back with the next step. And then his professor asked, and then what will happen? And he kept returning the same question throughout the whole exercise of this one theory that Sowell was expounding. And it was that moment, I guess, he felt when he realized what was going on. He had not got in the habit of thinking through the next step and the next step and the next step. And that as we tell stories about what we want conservatism to achieve and try to, I guess, recruit people to that cause, that we need to do that in our economic work, talking about economics, as well as about policy, to be able to walk people through the next step and the next step and ask them, well, what happens if this happens? What happens if that policy is passed? Because people spend a heck of a lot more time and investment making their own economic decisions than they do their political decisions.
And it's disgusting that those sort of claims get leveled at us and are hardly ever leveled against the left, who also has their fair share of anti-intellectual. I mean, most of the majority, the vast majority of their arguments are emotionally based. So when we talk about anti-intellectualism, I mean, there you go. it's pretty stark, the contrast when you get into the actual issues and how deep we go into ours, how we actually have documentation, how we can back up what we're saying versus what the left does, which is basically saying, well, it makes us feel good.
As I always say, nothing closes a mind faster than a heart. When your heart is committed to something, you will shut your mind down on it, and you will reduce your mind to being nothing more than an internal lawyer defending the choices and views that your heart has guided you to.
For example, it is Congress's constitutional responsibility to ask questions when the National Science Foundation decides to spend public funds on a climate change-themed musical. That's what qualifies. That's something that qualifies as science. $700,000 for that.
Wait, what? Climate change-themed what now?
Musical. A climate change-themed musical.